After the loss of his father, a teenage prodigy creates a highly technological suit of armor to investigate the culprit and decides to use his new powers to become a superhero. Today we're going to recap the story of the series, Iron Man: Armored Adventures, from 2009. With the help of his best friend, Tony Stark, aged just 16, forges super technological armor and can't wait to show off his latest work to his father. Howard is the billionaire founder of Stark Industries and Tony's main goal is to make him proud. However, when father and son finally get a few minutes to talk, Obadiah Stane enters the room and interrupts them. The man is furious because Howard rejected the proposal to turn an invention designed to improve people's lives into a weapon, even though he knew that this decision would generate millions of dollars in losses for the company. When the old man leaves, Howard reveals that he needs to show his son something and, over lunch, tells him about the McLuhan rings. The Chinese thought that these artifacts were magical, but Howard believes that they are a form of technology thousands of years more advanced than what exists on Earth. Upon arriving at the archaeological site where the ring was found, the businessman hands over the jewel so that some scientists can study it. On the journey home, Howard receives another call from Stane while Tony goes to the bathroom and, for the last time, refuses his employee's proposal. At that moment, the aircraft they are on explodes and only the young man manages to survive. 6 months have passed since the accident and, due to the damage he suffered to his heart, Tony has had to rely on the help of a reactor to survive. He now lives with Rhodey's family and tries to move on after the perishment of his father. As he is underage, Tony cannot yet run Stark Industries, so Stane takes advantage of this to run the company and make his own decisions until the young man turns 18. Before saying goodbye to Stane, Tony realizes that he is wearing his father's ring and becomes furious. The young man then accompanies Rhodey to school and tries not to freak out on the first day of school. Unlike his classmates, Tony is a genius who learned physics and advanced mathematics when he was still a child, so he has enough knowledge to leave his teachers in the lurch. That day, the young man meets Pepper and discovers that she is the daughter of an FBI agent who started investigating Stane after the supposed plane crash that took Howard Stark's life. After discovering that the old man had a lot to profit from his father's perishment, Tony decides to investigate him on his own and rushes to the warehouse where he keeps his secret laboratory hidden. With Rhodey's help, he intends to use the Iron Man armor to spy on Stane and find out if he is involved in the explosion. That afternoon, Tony uses a satellite to hack into Stark Industries' central computer and discovers that Stane has managed to finalize the project to turn the technology created by Howard into a weapon. Meanwhile, Rhodey keeps in touch with his friend via a phone call and informs him that a runaway train is about to hit the Stark Industries tower. Realizing that dozens of people will perish in this accident, Tony decides to act and uses his armor to alter the train tracks. The problem is that the construction of the other track has not yet been completed, so instead of hitting the tower, the vehicle will fall in the middle of the city. So the only solution Tony can come up with is to hold the train so that it loses speed, and he uses all the energy in his heart reactor to try to stop it from falling. However, when he realizes that his plan won't work, the young man begins to take measures to minimize the damage and separates the wagons so that only the first cabin falls into the city. During the crash, Tony uses his jet boots to fly under the wagon and manages to hold it up, preventing dozens of people from being crushed. With the repercussions of this heroic act, Iron Man became known and popular among the city's inhabitants. In a conversation with Rhodey, Tony remembers that his father's dream was to use technology to save lives and says that this is what he will do from now on. While Stane tries to find a way to produce armor like Iron Man's to use as war machines, Zhang, also known as Mandarin, thinks of a way to recover all the McLuhan rings. Just then, Jean Khan appears and tries to confront him, but ends up being humiliated by his stepfather. Hours later, one of the soldiers informs the young man that Stane, the CEO of Stark Industries, has one of the rings. When they arrive at school, Tony and Rhodey realize that all the students are creating theories about Iron Man and Pepper tells them that, according to her father, the FBI thinks that this superhero is actually part of a military experiment. That day, Tony goes after the diggers that Stane has created in order to destroy them and ends up becoming their main target. After firing at Iron Man, the creature tries to crush him, but the armor is tough and strong enough to remain intact even after the attack. Then 2 more diggers appear and Tony has to use an energy shield to protect himself. The young man is surrounded by machines, so he enlists the help of the thrusters to escape and fires laser beams at the diggers. During the battle, the excavator's power source becomes overloaded and the scientists who are part of Stane's team say that nothing can be done to prevent the explosion. Suddenly, a bright portal opens in the control room and Mandarin appears to take the ring, then gets rid of the security guards who are trying to stop him. Terrified, Stane tries to find out why the monster is visiting and immediately gives him the ring. While talking to Tony, Rhodey reveals that if those things explode, the whole of New York will disappear from the map. In an attempt to prevent the machines from exploding, the young man uses his own suit to absorb the energy from the core and needs to release it somehow, so he takes the opportunity to destroy the other diggers with his laser beam. Mandarin then appears and, after being knocked down, Iron Man attacks him. Seeing the McLuhan rings on his enemy's fingers, Tony is curious to find out who he is, but his armor is blown off by a huge pulse of energy. When Mandarin leaves, Stain shows up and tries to convince the superhero to work for him, but Iron Man immediately refuses. Upon returning to his hideout, Gene Khan celebrates the success of his mission, as he is now in possession of Mandarin's armor. Now that he has managed to imprison Zhang, the young man is thirsty for power and plans to reunite all the rings that have been lost. The next day, Tony shows up at Zhang's import store, but is greeted by his godson. The young man says he is looking for information about the McLuhan rings and reveals that his father kept a diary in which he wrote down everything he knew about the artifacts. However, Khan says that his stepfather is out of the country on business and asks how Zhang will find him when he returns. At this point, Khan discovers the school where Tony is studying and decides to enroll there so that he can keep an eye on him in order to obtain the information described in Howard Stark's diary. When she sees the young man, Pepper says she's heard about her new classmate, but can't remember exactly who he is. At the end of the lesson, Khan walks towards his limousine, but ends up suffering an attack. Luckily, Tony and Pepper were nearby and managed to pull him out before the vehicle exploded. Soon after, a van appears and a group of soldiers who have been sent by Magia approach to capture Khan in an attempt to blackmail his stepfather. As they are with the young man at the moment, Tony and Pepper are also taken and, when he sees his friends being captured, Rhodey rushes to the secret laboratory. Arriving at an abandoned warehouse, Tony tries to understand what it's all about and Killer Shrike reveals that Zhang is the leader of the Tong, the group Magia is at war with. At this point, Pepper remembers where she met Khan and says that his stepfather is a criminal linked to the Chinese underworld. While being held prisoner, Tony uses a device to transmit his location to Rhodey and, via remote control, the young man sends the Iron Man suit to him. At that moment, the soldiers start shooting at the armor and, when he finds Tony, Rhodey flies the suit towards him. While hiding behind a pile of boxes, the young man gets the chance to put on his armor and goes up against the criminals. However, it isn't long before Iron Man manages to defeat them and, while he chases Strike, Khan and Pepper look for a way out. When he is surprised by one of the enemies, Tony ends up being wounded and the soldier takes the opportunity to attack him with his laser. However, just as Iron Man was about to be defeated, he releases energy from the reactor in his chest and throws his opponent away. Finally, the young man pushes Shrike out of hiding and the two continue their duel as they fly over New York. At that moment, the villain uses electricity to overload the reactor that is attached to Tony's body, but the young man manages to destroy Shrike's flying suit and he suffers a huge fall. When he hears police sirens approaching, the young hero gets out of his armor and asks Rhodey to fly his suit back to the lab. Tony then goes to join his colleagues so as not to arouse suspicion. Even though he came out unscathed, Khan is not willing to let the criminals go unpunished and decides to capture them. The next morning, Tony goes to investigate one of Stark Industries' laboratories and is attacked by a guy wearing white armor to freeze things. When he realizes that Iron Man doesn't work for Stain, Donnie Gill stops shooting and introduces himself as a former employee of Stark International. He says he spent years doing cryogenics research for Stain and, in the end, the madman tried to turn his work into a weapon. According to Donnie, the reason he broke into the lab was to recover his research and then use it to put an end to Stain. On discovering Blizzard's real intentions, Tony offers to help him, but Rhodey advises his friend to be careful, as he still doesn't know if this guy can be trusted. To clear up his doubts, the young man gives his name as Donnie Gill and asks Pepper to help him check his criminal record. That night, Iron Man and Blizzard meet again and Tony decides to help him rebuild the weapon that Stain created. Meanwhile, Pepper breaks into her father's office and steals his laptop in order to use the FBI system to run a background check on Donnie. She then calls Rhodey, since Tony isn't answering his phone, and reveals that Donnie was recruited by Stain when he was still in prison for stealing technology and illegal experiments. Suddenly, Stain's security guards appear and manage to surround the invaders, who are trying to steal the reactor core. Immediately, Iron Man begins to think of a plan to escape, but Blizzard freezes all those men. Luckily, the guards are still alive and Tony manages to save them. Furious, the young man forbids Donnie from hurting innocent people and ends up being attacked again. At that moment, Navaska freezes Iron Man's suit, but the superhero manages to free himself and has to flee because his reactor battery is running out. After stopping by the lab to recharge his suit, Tony goes after Donnie, who, by now, has managed to find Stain. After eliminating all his guards, he finally gets the chance to take revenge, but is interrupted by Iron Man, who breaks through the window glass and attacks him. Despite taking several blows from his opponent, Blizzard is stronger than ever thanks to the weapon Tony helped him build and uses its power to freeze Stark Tower. However, before Donnie could complete his evil plan, Iron Man destroys his equipment and the villain ends up freezing himself. Before leaving, the superhero receives a message from Stain, who claims to be monitoring his every move and says that he will soon discover his true identity. In the morning, when she arrives at school, Pepper tells her friends that she's worried about her father because he's been acting strange about one of the cases he's working on. During class, an FBI agent shows up and informs them that he needs to talk to the girl, which makes Tony worried. The truth is that Rupert was badly beaten up the night before, while he was carrying out an investigation, and is now in hospital. When he wakes up and finds his daughter, the agent reveals that it was Mr. Fix who did this to him and then blacks out again. That night, Pepper enters the FBI database to search for the person responsible for hurting her father, but Mr. Fix manages to detect the search and sends his army to eliminate the girl. However, after hearing her house being broken into, Pepper manages to escape and calls Tony for help. When he discovers that his friend is being chased, the young man dons the Iron Man costume to go after her. Meanwhile, Rhodey calls Pepper and gives her the coordinates to escape from the criminals who are after her. When the girl is surrounded and about to be shot, Iron Man appears and asks her to go and hide in Rhodey's house. When they encounter the superhero, the soldiers flee and Mr. Fix hacks into Pepper's cell phone. He then discovers that the girl is on her way to Rhodey's house and sends his men after her. During the escape, Pepper is rescued by Iron Man and her suspicions that Tony is the superhero are confirmed. She is then taken to Rhodey's house and, when she gets there, finds her friend in chains. Seeing the girl, Black Whip frees him and is attacked by Iron Man, but during the battle, he strikes the superhero and Tony collapses. At that moment, Pepper and Rhodey show up and have to find a place to hide. When the villain appears, the young man tries to attack him, but ends up being captured. Pepper takes the opportunity to get help and finds Iron Man's armor empty. Soon afterwards, Black Whip approaches and, just as he is about to eliminate the young woman, Tony appears, using another suit to attack him. During the battle, once again, the warrior sent by Mr. Fix proves to be stronger than his opponent. However, while he is being hit, Tony concentrates all the energy in his armor into a single shot and throws Black Whip into an electric pole. After being electrocuted, the villain's costume explodes and he is immediately eliminated. Now that she knows her friends are working to fight crime, Pepper decides to join the team and help Iron Man become New York's greatest superhero. One day, after saving the city once again, Tony spots a meteor falling on a road under construction, but luckily no one is hurt. Suddenly, a robotic creature emerges from inside the crater and hurls a vehicle towards the newspaper's helicopter. Just then, Iron Man appears and saves the reporters. He then goes after the robot and ends up taking a punch that pushes him far away. Furious, Tony flies towards his opponent and fires laser beams that are immediately repelled by the Scarlet Dynamo armor. Realizing that the villain is on his way to the city, Iron Man tries to stop him with a series of punches, but his blows have no effect and, once again, the superhero is easily taken down. After being trampled by the Scarlet Dynamo, he loses consciousness and lies unconscious for a few minutes. When he wakes up, Tony sees a symbol on his opponent's armor and asks his friends to help him find out what it means. While Rhodey and Pepper are doing their research, Iron Man flies at high speed towards the giant robot and manages to bring it down, but the armor remains intact. Pepper then reveals that the symbol belongs to Project Pegasus and the serial number is linked to a suit of space armor belonging to Ivan Vanko. The problem is that this man was presumed eliminated 2 years ago during a space mission. While listening to the young woman's information, Iron Man is surprised by yet another attack and the Scarlet Dynamo throws a fuel truck at him. The robot then approaches and, seeing that the superhero is trapped under the vehicle, decides to blow it up. With his suit on fire, Tony quickly flies out of the atmosphere and manages to cool it down. When he returns to the planet, the young man follows the address found by Pepper and meets Harkov, a space scientist who was with Ivan when his suit was hit by the solar flare. According to Harkov, the astronaut was launched towards the sun and his team lost communication with him. The space station would also be destroyed if the group didn't abandon the mission. When they were already on their way to the ship, Ivan managed to connect with Harkov, but nothing could be done to rescue him as the station had been destroyed. As a result, the scientist was forced to abandon his partner, and that's why Ivan is so furious with him. When the Scarlet Dynamo approaches his mansion, the scientist activates all his defense mechanisms, but none of them can stop the enemy, who is thirsty for revenge. To stop the dynamo, Tony says he needs to see the design of his armor and asks his friends to find Ivan's family while Iron Man tries to hold him back. Pepper quickly arrives at Isabella Vanko's house and asks for her help to calm her husband down. Meanwhile, Tony continues to fight the robot until he is shot down. However, when the Scarlet Dynamo is about to eliminate Kharkov, Iron Man manages to get up and uses the rest of his energy to try to stop it. However, when he sees his wife and son, Ivan calms down and manages to get out of his armor, which is confiscated by the police. Thanks to his friends, Tony once again manages to prevent the entire city from being destroyed and takes the opportunity to take a nap while his suit's autopilot takes him back home. On ordinary days, Tony Stark doesn't even try to act like a normal kid and is always looking for trouble. During the lesson, he follows the police radio and leaves the classroom when he finds out that there are cars chasing a criminal who has broken a hole in a bank vault. Living Laser moves at such a high speed that it is impossible to keep up with its movements and not even the police bullets can hit it. But with his first shot, Iron Man immobilizes his opponent and manages to remove the vest that gives him superpowers. Seconds later, the cars appear and Parks is arrested. When he arrives at his laboratory, Tony begins to research where that teleportation device came from and discovers that it was his father who designed it. That prototype has flaws that make it unstable, which is why it was being kept in Howard Stark's safe, but somehow it was stolen. Tony then becomes suspicious of Stane and decides to investigate what's in the safe, because he knows that if the weapons his father designed fall into the wrong hands, innocent people could be in danger. That night, Parks begins to feel ill in prison and his body releases a great deal of energy. Thanks to the powers he has acquired, he manages to escape from jail and challenges Iron Man to a battle. Seeing Living Laser on the big screens in Times Square, Tony rushes to get his suit before the city's inhabitants are hurt. During the battle, Iron Man realizes that his opponent is even faster than before and tries to convince him to accept help, as the energy from the equipment that modified Park's body could be fatal. However, the man doesn't listen to him and continues his attack. Living Laser absorbs the energy of a large part of the city to turn his body into a weapon and tries to destroy Iron Man's armor. Tony then changes the energy frequency of his suit and fires. At that moment, the cells in Park's body collapse and he is pulverized. After completing his mission, the young man rushes to the theater and still manages to arrive in time to perform a school play alongside Pepper. The following week, Tony creates invisible armor to break into Stark Tower without being caught by the security cameras and manages to get to his father's safe. However, when he enters, he discovers that all the weapons have been taken and suddenly all the systems in his armor are turned off. As he used the invisibility function to enter the tower, his suit ran out of energy, so Tony has to leave the building to get the energy cells and return to recharge the armor. However, while climbing the stairs, the young man ends up being surrounded by security guards and taken to Stane's office. Luckily, Whitney, his daughter, is also there and leaves with Tony. When the two leave the room, the CEO orders his guards to search every corner of the building and find out why the young man broke in. Desperate, Tony finds his friends in the lab and Pepper devises a plan to recover the armor. The next morning, he calls Trisha, his father's former secretary, and asks for her help in authorizing a school trip. However, when the teenagers arrive at the building, Tony is stopped by the security guards and asks Khan to give his backpack to Rhodey. When he gets outside, Tony finds Happy and reveals that he has been expelled for no apparent reason. He then asks his classmate to help him get back into the tower. Just then, Happy throws his basketball at the security guard and distracts him while Tony breaks into the building and finds Rhodey. When he realizes that the young man has broken in, Stane orders all the exits from the building to be blocked and sends an army to look for Tony. His agents spent the whole night searching the building in the early hours of the morning to try to find out why the young man had gone there the night before. However, the tower has 110 floors and even though officials have searched almost 90% of them, nothing has been found. When Tony and Rhodey try to open the vault door, an alarm goes off, but the pair manage to get in and close the door. While Tony recharges his armor, the drones sent by Stane destroy the door and, when the machines manage to break in, Iron Man destroys them with his laser beam. After catching his friend, the superhero opens a new passage and manages to dodge the drones, which are still trying to chase him. While flying to the top of the tower, Tony manages to get rid of the last of the machines that are after him and Rhodey says that they need to separate so as not to arouse suspicion. After Iron Man leaves the tower, Rhodey finds Pepper and his other classmates and reveals that the plan was a success. Furious at the invasion and, above all, at not having discovered Stark's plan, Stane goes personally to look for him and is surprised to find the young man studying inside the school bus. So what did you think of this series? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more series recaps. See you next time.